Hi guys, it's Blackie and welcome back to the channel. Okay, recently Dave Canterbury did an outstanding video talking about bedrolls, and he was showing his setup. Really good video, and I really encourage people to go watch it if you're thinking about using a bedroll. And I've had several people ask me after seeing that video and having seen my videos in the past, want to know some thoughts on a bedroll and etc. So that's what this is, okay? Now, all a bedroll needs is, it needs to be some way of insulating you from the elements like rain, dampness, etc., wet ground. It needs to give you a thermal insulation of some kind so that the cold of the ground doesn't get to your body, so you have some sort of layering there that the body heat can be trapped in but the cold can't leach it away. And you need some sort of top cover for the current conditions, plus what you're wearing. Okay, as I've said in the past talking about sleeping bags, when they say on that sleeping bag that this sleeping bag is rated all the way down to 20 below, my question is 20 below with me butt naked in that bag, or 20 below with me wearing correct clothing to be in 20 below? See, you understand how that bag's going to get awful bulky if it's going to let me in that bag wearing all those layers, or it's going to have to be awful bulky to be able to hold that kind of heat and insulate me if I'm butt naked in that bag. All of it comes down to you and how your body generates heat, and we talked about that in my recent class video talking about staying warm, insulated in winter camping, etc. Now, from the surplus angle, okay, you're going to see this thrown out there a lot. This is an old U.S. Army poncho. This is one of the old vinyl ones from Vietnam. These make excellent bases to form a bedroll out of because it's waterproof, it's tough, it's durable. Yes, the more modern sil nylon can do the same thing, but it wears out holes a lot faster than these old ones. But it's hard to find these. And so you got to shift over some sort of tarp or something to be tough enough to do it. Even then, expect you're going to get holes in it. Laying on the ground, even when you're doing your absolute best, you're going to get holes in it because your body weight grinding and turning and everything, and that little stub sticking up you didn't see, that little bitty nothing that you cut off will wear a hole in them. And so they're never very waterproof for very long. So you end up having to have another layer underneath you. So, some sort of leaf tick underneath you. I'd recommend taking one of those construction bag liners that we're supposed to all be carrying and put that inside of a bedroll. Because as you see, I live in the eastern woodlands. There is always pine straw or leaf on the ground, and so it would behoove me, and I will be doing an upcoming video talking about creating the leaf tick, and I will take that bag and stuff it full of browse, leaves, whatever, to make up an insulating layer that I'm going to be laying on top of with a bedroll. Now I'm going to do this if I'm going to be laying inside of a tent, on a inside of a pup tent, inside of a diamond shelter, or if I'm going to be in some way, you know, contacting with the ground. I'm going to use my environment to try to insulate me from that ground, okay? And something waterproofy works good as the outer layer, okay? And there's a bigger improvement coming up, and I'll point that out in a minute. Now I want a layer in there to insulate me and help hold the heat. Again, am I getting into this bag butt naked? Or am I getting in this bag whatever I'm wearing that should be correct? So I'm just adding layers to what, if I can comfortably stand out here in whatever this temperature is going to be. Let's say for the sake of argument it's going to be 25 degrees. If I'm wearing a couple of base layers, the long insulated underwear, and then my outer layers, and I'm able to stand out here and remain comfortable in that, getting into the bag or covering me up with these additional layers is just icing on the cake, right? It's going to help hold that heat. But it's my personal insulation that I'm bringing to this party allows me to carry a lighter bedroll because I'm going to be wearing so many layers. You see what I'm saying? So you got to mix and match depending on your needs. Now, the U.S. Army Poncho Liner is a good insulating light blanket. You can use more than one of them. The ties on the corners are for tying it into that poncho. You can tie more than one. And in the past, when I had a Ranger roll made up that went into an old pickup truck I had 3 poncho liners. Every one of them had a little minor hole in it or whatever, and I picked them up for cheap. And I tied all 3 of them into that and turned it into a bedroll in case the truck broke down. It was an old, and it was the only Ford I ever had, and therefore I was very susceptible to being broke down in the middle of nowhere. And we didn't have cell phones back in them days. And so I carried that kind of thing. So 3 of the poncho liners, one inside the other, and then inside that cover, plus me wearing proper clothing, would be adequate in my environment at that time. Now, one of the things that makes these so desirable is they're lightweight. They're warm for their size, okay? But they are not rated down very low, so you got to start fluffing it up. They're not very thick, and that's something we're going to talk about here in depth in a second. See how thin that is? All this is a dead air layer. So as the heat rises out of me, it goes into it. Think like a sponge, okay? So my body heat goes into it, and since these fibers are spaced out but kind of dense at the same time, the heat, the BTUs of your body heat get up into it, and they have to kind of wiggle their way out. Now if you put a cover over the top of it that is not breathing, like that other side of that poncho, you trap that heat so it doesn't just go off into the atmosphere easy. That normal heat coming off it, that heat always rises. So if I'm laying there with this on my chest, it's rising up into it, right? If there's a barrier on the other side that it can't go through, it's kind of trapped there. And then it's got a thermal transfer rather than just floating off like a balloon, okay? So these are good, but they're not good for very low down in temps. Now you got to start adding up layers. Something else you're going to hear spoken of quite often. And all this is, by the way, this is an old one-win bag that I had, the actual stuff sack, and I put a poncho liner into it. That way I could compact carry. So I don't think they sell these bags separate. They may on the website, but this got a cinch cord. It was a underquilt was originally in it. But I think that this is a handy way to carry a poncho liner for whenever you're going to stick it on your pack, your rucksack, or whatever. It's quick and easy, and then this bag can be turned into a pillow. Okay? Back to, from poncho liner, let's talk about the other surplus thing everybody talks about. Adding a blanket. Now this is a U.S. Army issue wool blanket. You see how big it is. That's going to become important in a minute. You see how thin it is. Wool is unusual. It's a natural fiber. It's how sheep stay warm in snow and extreme conditions. See? All they've done is taken the wool off the sheep and turned it into a blanket. It's matted down tight like a felt, but it still has those pockets, so heat doesn't transfer through it very well. And according to the U.S. military, even when it is wet, it still maintains like 60% of its warmth. Something that poncho liner does not do whenever it is wet. It has no warming capability. It doesn't trap warmth. Even when wool is wet, it still traps some heat, better than the other stuff. So when you start talking about modern fiber, and that's all we're doing in sleeping bags and stuff like that, poncho liners, you're creating a man-made fiber that is there to mimic a natural fiber like wool, like down. So this is a produced in a factory in a lab somewhere synthetic fiber that's a hollow little tube that'll trap that heat, and we take that and make a batting out of it, and that becomes the liner in a poncho liner, the batting inside of a poncho liner. it works well. It will get crushed down eventually, and it will lose a lot of its warming abilities. That's the reason a brand new Poncho Liner is about a 1/2 inch thicker when you fold it up than one that's been in the field for a year or two, because it's been crushed down. And that's the reason the guys in the field would trade them in after a while. When you start feeling cold, you get you a new Poncho Liner and turn that old one in. A lot of them in surplus, therefore, are going to be those crushed down ones. Okay. These wool blankets were meant to be used on a bed, you know, in barracks, that type thing to issue, or on board ship. The Navy has these as well. And they're semi-disposable, really, from their tactical point of view. They're warm, but they're also thin, and they wear holes in them quickly and easily. And therefore, if they got dirty, got nasty, or whatever, you just turn the thing in and got another brand new one, right? For us, in one of these blankets, and the average person wearing proper layers, you can go down into the 50s with something like this, as long as you're wearing proper clothing for the 50s. This is just an outer layer over you. You wrap it around, you add a little bit more, like I said, a poncho or something, a non-breathable on top, so that heat don't just flow out of it. And this will take you down to the 50s, something like that. But see how big that is. Whenever you're reading historical accounts and accounts from way back in the day, and they're talking about a bedroll and they had a blanket in it, a heavy blanket, you'll hear this term quite often. It goes all the way back to the 1700s and before, really. A Whitney blanket were highly prized. Sometimes they were called trade blankets. Okay, they're a lot bigger than this. So this is a, now these two blankets are the same basic size, okay? But what you're looking at is how thick that is. Now you see how thick that is versus that. This is a Whitney. And so you see, now roll exactly the same, but look how big that is. This blanket is double the thickness of that Army blanket. It is probably 5 times the warmth of that Army blanket, because this bigger, thicker material trap more of your heat. Think of it as a bigger sponge, okay? You still need to put something over the top of this that seals off and you don't lose air, because if you just lay down and wrap up with this, you'll be semi-warm, but your heat's going through it. If you'll put like a Poncho Liner or something on the outside of it to keep that air from just flowing through it, you'll be a whole lot warmer. It doesn't even have to be very thick. I have taken before an old silk nylon rain poncho, it's super thin, and put it on the outside of one of these blankets like a bedroll, and it would seal up the heat, and I was very toasty warm. Now one of these in proper clothing, you can go down into the 20s, as long as you got that top layer and you're wearing proper clothing, okay? Probably 20s. I know I have taken mine down into the like 28, 29, 27 before. But as you notice, you're getting in something kind of bulky. And there's a break point in there where, even though we're carrying bedrolls in vehicles now, or on something, or a sled or something, and not usually on our back, especially in the dead of winter, it doesn't matter if it's a little big and a little heavy. In fact, bigger and heavy is fine as long as it's trapping the heat and keeping me dry and everything else. It has to insulate me from the ground, usually some sort of pad in there. It has to seal me up from the elements so I'm not having air loss. It's got to be waterproof, so to speak, to keep rain from getting in, etc. And it's got to trap wind, be windproof, so keep the wind from getting into it and stealing away my heat. All of the above. Now, a modern take on it, and this is the one that rides in my vehicle. And I did a video, earlier in the year, probably 6-8 months ago now, on this. And what this is a Ranger roll. And for those of you that don't know, it is a U.S. Army poncho, a U.S. Army Poncho Liner, a emergency reusable space blanket. And I have rolled it up, and it is inside of a U.S. MSS sleep system bivy cover. And that is the bedroll I carry in my vehicle, because with that, I can get into this and I'm sealed off from the elements. I'm not going to get wet. I can completely cover, and there's enough insulation power in there to trap my body heat and keep me warm in any temperature I'm going to incur in South Alabama. Right? Now you guys up in North Country, you got to make something bigger and rougher to handle it. And so this size bedroll, which weighs probably, I'd say about maybe 4.5 pounds, something like that, maybe 5. It's less than a gallon of milk, that's 8 pounds. It's kind of bulky and everything, but you see how you start getting more and more insulation, you start losing compact. You got to get more bulky to handle it. Now this one is something I really picked up, is an antique bedroll. It's an antique drawstring type bedroll like Dave showed in his video, but this one's a little bit later. It's got a zipper in it, so it's probably 40s or 50s. But you see how big and bulky this was. And this was considered a bedroll back in them days. Excuse the shooting. It's the 2 days after Christmas and people got guns for Christmas, so of course they got to come sight them in. We got some deer hunting still to do down here, so you know. So in conclusion, whatever combination you want to come up with, do you want to carry poncho liners? Do you want to use a poncho for the outer layer and make it out of all surplus for cost? Do you want to take a tarp and make the outer covering and then put a pad in it and then a light sleeping bag in there? You know, whatever. Whatever mix or match combos for you to ground pound is what you're going to need. But it has to be individual to you because of how warm you sleep, how much you naturally generate body heat. Remember, you're supposed to be wearing layers. And so if I'm going camping and I'm wearing all these layers to be comfortable in this environment, the only thing I'm going to do when I lay down is I'm going to take my field jacket off. That's going to be folded up like I've shown in the video and becoming a pillow, and that's going to become a pillow in there. And then I'm going to probably have another layer, like an extra warm layer to put on over the top to kind of replace it, like a sleeping turtleneck or something like that to go over my layers I'm already wearing. And I'm going to get into my bedroll. As long as I'm insulated from the ground and I've got good insulation around me to trap that, and there's a waterproof barrier, a windproof barrier, I should be okay. As long as all factors remain the same. But there is no guarantee. You have to experiment, and it's by trial and error. So you see how big and bulky that gets into. And I have a down sleeping bag that's rated to 20 below. It was a North Face. It's a mummy type sleeping bag that it's the size of this and weighs like 3.5 pounds. So you get down to where sleeping bags, you see where they come in at point X. Having the insulation, having the outer covering that's waterproof, weatherproof, etc. to help hold that heat so I don't radiate my heat out. My warm layers are not losing it by airflow going through them, coming from me and going up and out. They're being trapped and trapping pockets. The whole thing is to make pockets of dead warm air around you. I'm not a big fan of mummy bags because they're so constrictive. I get kind of claustrophobic in them, especially when I'm waking up cold in the middle of the night and I need to move around and I can't. It kind of gets you kind of panicky, and then you want to get up, which is the worst thing to do. So you need to be able to move around in that dead airspace to shift around. So if you get a little bit cool on one side, you can turn away from it. Maybe the wind's coming from that direction, and you need to be able to push that layer out a little bit to make a little dead airspace between the two of you. See, ground pounding can be very successful if you have a way to carry the stuff and the bulk and the weight doesn't matter. There's no reason for you to be uncomfortable out in the field. All you need is a little bit of experience and the right gear that you yourself pick to fit you, and you will be quite comfortable and happy. Hope you've enjoyed this video, guys. If you have, please hit that like, share, and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. And I hope you have a wonderful 2025. Till next time, guys, I'm Blackie, wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.